I'm not mad. You know, I'm just playing. Last time I met.
Hello, everyone. You guys-
Hello.
Yep. All right. Great. Thank you. All right, guys. Welcome to ITS 372, 2 o'clock lab time. Okay, so I assume everyone can hear me. Some people. All right, so let's get started. So today it's a lab session. Therefore, it's kind of like open. I'll make a few reminders about the assignments, and then I'll talk about the new assignment. I'll go over that a little bit, which is the SNMP assignment, and then after that, I'll just leave it open. For you guys, if you have any questions or however you want to do it. Reminders, you have the file system analysis lab. I believe that's due tonight. That was the last lab, which means everything else also would be due tonight. I remind you that exam 2 will be on Monday. So please don't forget that. It'll at 2 o'clock, it'll open up in the Blackboard system and you can take the exam there. It'll be at 2 hours, right? So it'll close immediately. So it'll open at 2, it'll close at 4. All right. So let me start by going over the SNMP lab. Just go over that one. I think you'll like this lab. It's a lot easier than, say, some other labs. It just takes, it will take a bit of work. We're not going to do any scripting today, so I'll save the scripts for the next week. And so today I kind of just want to leave the lab open, see how it goes in this medium, and basically talk about that lab. Okay. So can you guys hear me? Can someone just say we can hear you? So I know it's.
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead. So I need to share my screen. All right, and I think I have to add some participants. Okay. All right, so participants have been added. All right, so let's take a look at this week's lab. Okay, so this is the new lab assignment. This is called, as you know, we went over the lecture on Monday, which is for the simple network management protocol. Okay, so we went over that. Okay, so we went over that. Okay, so we went over the lecture on Monday, and now today you guys will be, for those of you that have finished the previous labs, you can start with this one. This is I think it's a 1-week lab. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I don't, as I said, it's a simple one. This lab, I know we had some issues last week, some comments about doing the labs with just one VM. That's perfectly doable with this one, even though it is really structured to be done in 2. Actually, with more than 2. But, given our circumstances, we can, do it with 2 or do it with 1. Okay? So basically what you have to do is you have to if you're doing it with 2. So I'll explain this as if you were doing it with 2. So you'll take, the VM 1604, make a clone of it, and then now one of the machines is one of the machines is the manager. Okay, so one of the machines is the manager, right? manager, and one of the machines is the agent. Okay, so if you notice in this document, it says configure the agent, right? So this process would be similar for every agent. So basically what that means is when you're doing that, you're configuring the machine that sends SNMP data to the manager. So the manager is going to do the SNMP walk, and then the agent is going to reply basically, okay? But they're both, you know, they can both be seed, you know, 1604. Now it is also possible to do this with just one VM. In that case, that VM is both manager and agent. So you can imagine that what you have is you have, you know, the manager software, right? The manager process, let's say. And then you have the agent. And then you have the agent process. Okay, so both of those can be on the same virtual machine. There's no reason why they can't be on the same virtual machine, okay? So that's an important, so you can do it in both ways. And this, you know, so you can do it with 1604, it can be seed. I would recommend that you do it with just a plain 1604. But if you want to do it with seed, go ahead. If you ask me between the two, which one, use 1604. All right, so disregard here where it says 1204, that, you know, it doesn't matter, 1604. Basically what you will do, if you notice here in the document, okay, as you configure the agent, you're going to basically, once you have the two VMs, you will install SNMP. So notice there you have some sudo apt-get installs, right? You know, SNMPD, right? And that basically just allows you to have the daemon running in the background, all right? And that's it. Actually, the installing it is very easy. It is very, very, very easy. You can actually think, you know, by default, I believe, you know, it just has everything set up, and all you have to do is probably make a few modifications to get this to work. So if you remember in the lecture slides, I said the very first command you're going to run is SNMP walk. So you can see that there. Okay, so SNMP walk is a you know, as you remember, is the very first process that will allow you to query the machine. So if you're using two VMs, you would run SNMP walk here, right? So this is where you would run SNMP walk. And basically you're gonna walk the agent. So you're gonna get a lot of the variables of that agent. If you're in just one single VM, then you would run it from this process to that process, but you're basically still doing the same thing. So that's what I want you to understand, is that at the end of the day, it's just port numbers and an IP. It's a socket, right? So the socket, you know, all communications pretty much are, you know, between one socket and another socket. So if you're working with VM or one single VM, it's basically that you open a socket and then another socket in the same machine. It just so happens they have the same IP, but different port numbers. Usually that's really it. So, you know, remember that whenever you're maybe worried about a lab or something like that, you know, you can always think of that you can always open two sockets in the same machine, so you can most likely do the work. All right, so when you run SNMP walk, as you see here, you might get a timeout. All right, and that means that you need some additional configuration. Now remember that these instructions are meant to be guidelines for Unix, right? They're not tutorials. So just keep in mind, you know, some of the files and folders may be in different places, but in general, you'll probably go to etc snmp and look for that file, snmpd.conf for configuration. And you're gonna make some changes there. And I already added in this document some screenshots basically. So the screenshots here are the acts, as you can see highlighted there in big letters. We need to specify the access control. So now you have two machines, right? Manager and agent. I'm sorry, that should be a name. Manager and agent, and the manager wants to query the agent. It basically means that the manager wants to actually reach and grab information about the agent. So there should be, of course, some access control. Now, I did say that SNMP does not really provide that much security, which is true, but you know, it's funny. It's you know, it's hard for me to describe this, but it's like people love to hate SNMP, if that makes sense. So it's the kind of thing that, oh yeah, that should be better, it should be more secure, and you know, all these things. But at the end of the day, it's still pretty good. Okay, so or it's still the default. It's still, with its versatility, it's still the thing to fall back on. In any case, it does have, I think I mentioned this, 3 security mechanisms, right? Mainly 2 for authentication, and then 1 for confidentiality and integrity. So we don't care so much about confidentiality and integrity right now, which would be the crypto part. We're only going to look at the mechanisms for authentication, right? And if, I don't know if this, let's see, can I write here? It doesn't let me write. Oh, no, it does. Nice. All right, so if you notice there, that those are the main access controls. There are actually 3 things related to access control, and I'm numbering them here. Now, what do you have to do? You have to go, and please pay attention to this, because it's a common common question students have, or a common mistake you can make, that there's a line in here in the document where I say comment out everything in this file except for the things that I'm asking you to modify. Right? So when I say that, really you have to go to that file, and you have to go line by line by line by line by line and make sure everything is, you know, commented out. You comment out things in these files with a pound sign. Okay? Are there any questions so far?
Nope.
No questions. All right. Thank you. All right. So the first thing you will do, you're going to map the community name to a security name. You can see that here. Okay. Community name to a security name. So remember that, you know, I think, you know, I've said this so many times in this class, everything in Linux is a file. Everything pretty much is a text file. And so parsing and modifying things by typing information is the way to go. So you can see that here. You're going to use this command, com2sec, and you're going to specify some security names. 2 names in particular, local and my network. And as the names imply there, that just means that local refers to the local host. So for instance, for those of you working on a single VM, right? So, you know, that governs that. Whereas those of you, you know, that have 2 VMs, right, which I recommend if you can, then keep in mind that in that case, and I should say one thing, I just thought of something, that whenever you're running your VMware, right, on one machine, you technically do have another machine, which is the physical machine. Even though, you know, most of you probably have a Windows environment, don't forget that that Windows machine is tied to your VM. So they're both in the same network. They share a NAT card. And so what I'm trying to say is there are situations, even if you're doing a one VM exercise, you still have the Windows machine. So you could ping, you could run some commands from the terminal of Windows, etc. All right, so that's just FYI if you weren't aware of that. All right, so going back to SNMP, we set up the community name and we associate to it, the security name, and we assign to it a community name. So in this case, for the local host, we tie it to this, the word public. Believe it or not, that is the password. So it's not hashed, it's not encrypted, it's just a plain clear text password I actually recommend change that to something else, because sometimes when you see the word public, you assume it's a setting and not an actual password. So you might want to change that if you'd like. Now, as far as the configuration of the network, so that's when you're doing this scenario. So there you have to specify also the community string, which is the password, but also notice here that you're going to specify that. And that just means, you know, the network ID and subnet mask of the computer that is the manager. All right, so that's what you're specifying. So you're saying, for instance, hey, the manager is 192.168.189.7, let's say, right, to .7. So that machine can manage this agent because this machine falls in this, you know, it would be part of that network ID. Okay, so now if instead you were using, let's say 250, 215, something like that. 205, not 250. I'm using the school's computer, so 205, 215, something. That IP is not going to fall within this range, and therefore that manager will not be able to query the information from that agent. Okay, so that's the first thing. So I hope that makes sense. All right. Are there any questions about that? Okay, no questions. So the second part is you're going to map the security name into group names. Okay, so you're going to create some group names. Okay, and the group names are useful because then you can set parameters by group name. So you can give it, you know, the names that you want, but you notice that these parameters here let me close this browser because this computer, it's consuming resources or something. Okay, so all right, so as I was saying, you create these groups, and this is the same idea of accounts and groups, right? And you have an RW group and then an ROG group. So if you notice, you have them like that. So then the RW group is down here, and then the RO group is up here, right? So you define the groups and you tie the groups to the security names, which are, you know, local and my network. You can see that there, right? So that's the access control of this. Notice also that you tie it to the versions of SNMP that you allow. So there's basically version 1, version 2, version 3, you know, with different, you know, version 2C and so on. For our purposes, version 2 it seems to be the most efficient. Version 3, we'll see in the slides later on. It's been made to handle more bulk data, and it's for you know, it's got a lot of the confidentiality and integrity built into it. Okay, so once you have that, all right, so we define, so you're gonna define this exactly as you see it here, exactly as you see it there. Then the third one is, notice you're gonna define for each one of these groups, you're gonna create access settings, okay? So you're going to create access settings of the rights basically that you have. So similar to, you know, read, write, permissions. So in this case, you know, things like any, you know, specify anything. And then in particular here, notice this, read and write. So if you remember, we talked about those two in the lecture, and they tie basically to get and set, all right? So they tie to the get and the set. So in this case, if you notice, we are not using set. So you're not allowing this agent So you're not allowing the parameters of this agent machine to be set remotely, okay? And remember, I talked about that for security reasons. You know, mainly we want to use SNMP for monitoring in our purposes. So in this case then, the read is allowed all. And so basically that gives you the opportunity to actually get any data that you want, okay? All right, so that's the access control part of it. I think it's pretty straightforward. Remember, in this file, these would not be commented, right? But everything else in the file. So in this file, this, and this sections are not commented out. Then you're gonna move below, and basically here, you're going to, if you notice, and on bullet 18, it says, also add the following view as seen on the screenshot below. All right, and so the view is, if you notice, this is just the same access groups. That's just the same thing from above, so it's the same thing. Instead, if you scroll down, you'll see here, everything, this is commented out, that's commented out, that's commented out, that's commented out, but this is not commented out, right? That's the view that you must have in there. And what this basically says is that you allow everything to be seen in SNMP. So for instance, the parameter that is really important is this one, the 0.1, right? So if you notice here, we have an example. This is, if you remember, I kind of alluded to this in the slides on Monday. I said those are the OIDs, the object identifiers, okay? And so every variable in SNMP has an OID, and the OIDs are structured in a hierarchical model, right? So it's a little tree, you know, goes that way, that way, that way, that way. So for instance here, you're kind of implying, okay, we would only allow, you know, interfaces, right? Because the interfaces fall within this branch of the tree, for instance, okay? Now, when you say this one over here, this 0.1, dot 1 really, what you're saying is all basically. So you can query everything in that machine, right? So this is a way, so this views allow you to control, view it, allow you to control the OIDs or variables that you can query. Okay. Then the last part you're going to do, so this one also is commented out. So that's 4 things in that file that are commented out. Everything else should have, you know, a comment, a pound sign in front of it, okay? Otherwise it won't work. The last part in that file is something I want you to do for the lab itself. Since you guys will be querying things, one of the things that I want to see when you query your own device is your name. I want to see in your screenshot your name, okay? So what you need to do is you need to find these variables. You can set them up in there somewhere, the system location and the system contact. And these are so that somebody, you know, they query your machine with SNMP, and now they know, oh, this machine I just queried, where is this again? Oh, this is in powers, you know, 139. And oh, by the way, who's in charge of this? You know, Zachary. So someone like that, okay? So you wanna make sure that you modify these and put your name. So, you know, write your name. Here, please write your name there. And then of course, when you do the SNMP walk and all of that, you're going to show me a screenshot with your name on it. And that's something that I'll be looking for in the report. All right, so once you've done that, you're going to restart SNMP, so pretty straightforward there. Right, obviously you save the file, all that. Then, you know, you can, these are some commands that you can play with to start. You know, notice, you know, remember I always ask little questions here and there, so please go over, answer the questions. And then finally, once everything is configured correctly, remember from the manager to the agent, Or if you're working on one single VM, you have two services running, a manager and agent. So from one socket to another socket, or from one socket to another socket. Doesn't matter if it's through the network or not. All right, remember we defined sockets in a previous lecture. So now, if you're on bullet 29, you just do, again, Snmpwalk. You run Snmpwalk. You are going to be using version 2, which is allowed because you allowed it in the access control list. And then you're going to specify the community string. And then, of course, as you know, this is the local host. So basically, you're at this point, you're configuring the machine, you know, just yourself, right? So just yourself. All right. Now, if you were, this part that I introduced here, you don't really need to worry about it. It's in it, you know, if you're running, let's say if you were in your home and you're on bridge mode on your computer or at school, everything is on bridge mode and you get, you know, different subnet masks and different IP addresses, you need to specify those exactly in the, you know, what's the network ID, what's the subnet mask. And so I used this lab to introduce you. You've probably seen this tool, I'm sure, in other classes, but you can use the IP calc, which is, as the name implies, an IP calculator in Linux. So that will, you know, you put in the IP and the net mask, and then it's going to give you all the information that you need to plug in the access control, to plug in basically in this access control. So, you know, just to make your life a little bit easier there to help you, depending on what setup you're using at home, you know, bridge or something like that. All right, so, and then just, you know, as you can see, another question, what does this give you? So I just want you to kind of play with that tool, get a feel for it. Put a screenshot. You can always just put that in there and then show the screenshot of what the output is. Okay? All right. Scripts. So as I said, we're not going to write scripts this week. We're going to save that for next week. This lab does take a bit of time, so I want to see how it goes for you guys. I think you can do it in a week, but we'll see. But that's why I don't want to give you any scripts. So, you know, these are instructor provided scripts, so we're going to go over them next week. However, though, now so these scripts will be, because, you know, I like to make everything from scratch. I don't just like using some tool. And so I'm going to show you guys how we can write Python code from anywhere, right? And then the Python code, you know, you might have a manager over here, an agent, but the Python code can also speak SNMP, and then basically it can send out a UDP packet that's an SNMP GET request, and then the agent will reply with the response and so on, right? So we'll do that exercise next week. It'll be very useful, especially when we're dealing with OIDs and so on. For today, all I want you to do is install PySNMP, all right? That's really all I want you to do. So we're gonna look at, you know, as you know, there's lots of ways of installing software. For those of you using Conda, you know, I'm sure, you know, you can use that. You've also probably used pip, right? You can also, you know, you've used sudo apt-get install, but there's another way. You know, there's so many things that you can do in Python. So there's another way. If you install something called Python setup tools, then you get the possibility that you can use that, the easy install. And that's another way, you know, you can try sudo easy install PySNMP. And so try this, try any of the ways that you want. One of them should be able to install the PySNMP library. So just make sure you have it. Once you think you've installed it, go to the terminal and type Python. When you do that, a Python interpreter will open, right? And then in there, just do import PySNMP. If the software was installed correctly, all that's going to happen is you're going to get the prompt again. But that's a good thing because you're not getting a, you know, an error. So you're not getting an error, and you're not getting a, you know, a warning or anything like that. Okay. All right. So are there any questions so far, guys?
Nope.
Oh, all right. Great. So pretty clear. Good. All right. So let's keep going. All right, now configuring the manager, right? So now you're going to configure the manager. And remember, we looked at things from the agent point of view because the agent needed to grant access with access controls, right? So it needed to grant access from multiple sources, okay? Multiple sources. All right. So now, remember again, you know, this can 1604. It's fine. Worked fine. All right, so now you're going to try to do an SNMP walk, let's say again, this time from another machine, right? So that's, you know, the same thing, right? So you install on the manager, SNMP again, and then you can do the SNMP, but try now a different IP, right? Try a different IP. All right. And so play around. Basically what this says is play around with different things, try other ranges, and discuss your results. All right. So that's really the objective of that. Notice that you specified a range of IPs that can connect to the agent, right? So the goal is, you know, try different things, other ranges, and then discuss your results. But at the end of the day, you need to make, so in essence, if you have one designated agent, this is what should happen. The agent should be able to SNMP walk itself, and the manager should be able to SNMP walk the agent. Does that make sense? So that's really the idea. The manager could also be an agent and SNMP walk itself, so that's okay as well. And these are the three things that you want to check. Plus, the fourth one would be trying other IP ranges and just noticing that it won't work because of the access control. So try a different public community string, and different IP, and try different IP ranges. Okay, try other ranges. All right. Okay, so now that all of that is done, at this point, basically, I would say at this point, you know, at this point, you have done all the configuration of the SNMP daemons and everything like that. Now come in, so that's the protocol. So I would describe this as you have installed and configured the protocol, okay? Now what comes next is so let's say this is the SNMP protocol, like the universal, let me put it that way. You've installed a universal SNMP protocol. Now what comes is, you know, how people make money, right? So you could go into business doing this yourself, right? And so this is the vendor. This will be the vendor SNMP tools, and there are many of these, okay? So there are many that you can, you know, pay, you know, money for, because they provide a lot of services for you. In our case, we're gonna just try a simple open source one, but the open source one will give us, will basically provide a way for us to view the information. Right, so you might want to read up a little bit on cacti. So all you have to do on bullet 4, in very simple, sudo apt-get install cacti, and then it's going to open up several pop-ups. So, you know, probably if you installed, when you took 362 with me, you know, you probably installed LAMP, you know, or MySQL or something on Linux, and it's the same thing. It gives you a lot of pop-ups, and you have to put in passwords. Be mindful of the passwords. Obviously, if you were doing this in an environment that's important, you'd want to use like secure passwords. Here, I just recommend using the same password everywhere, tour or something like that, so you don't forget, because later on, it might ask you for that password and you don't remember, and now you have to go back and install everything, okay? This will work. So this is the first introduction to using Apache, okay? So now, because this is going to be a web interface, a GUI basically, a nice GUI, you're going to need Apache as well, all right? So in the next lab, I will talk about HTTP itself a little bit more and integrate that, because the next lab, we're going to try to build an SNMP with web, right? So that's why the scripts will come in handy later on. All right, so from this point on, it's very much like a Windows type of installation, a lot of pop-up boxes, and click here, click there, click, follow instructions. So you basically just follow these instructions, okay? You'll need to install something else, something called Cacti Spine, okay? And basically at the end of the installation, this is what you'll be able to do. So this is the thing that I'm gonna be looking for in your lab report. So I need to see several graphs, okay? So this is what I need to see. I know you're successful in your lab because you have, you will have these graphs. It takes a while for them to collect data, okay? So usually in the past, you can see here, basically the students collected from Saturday to Sunday, okay? So it does take, not days, but you can leave the VM running for a couple of hours. And while this is doing what SNMP will do is it'll query by itself the information, save it into a database, and then you specify that you want some graphs, okay? So all of this is done by the cacti program. So for instance, this is a variable, Linux memory usage, okay? So you can select a few variables. It doesn't really matter which ones. I'm not asking you to do an analysis of the data, just the local host memory usage. I just need to see that you're able to collect the data and monitor things, basically. Okay, so this will be as you can see, Cacti will be a web application. Notice you're gonna need a username and password, so make sure you follow the instructions carefully there. Okay. All right, so what Cacti has is it basically shows the devices like in a list, and usually the devices will say, oh, device so-and-so with name so-and-so is up. And then, so your servers, your printers, so any device that you configure in SNMP. So for instance, you could configure, if you have a Windows server, VM, or something like that, you can configure, Windows server. It might be a little bit hidden nowadays in modern Windows, as I said, because they try to commercialize it. You'll have to find out, go online and say, how do I enable SNMP in Windows? Okay, but otherwise, just do it with the VMs, Linux VMs. Okay, so the Cacti will have devices, and it'll list them basically, the device, device 1, device 2, device 3, and then it'll say up, and then maybe this one will say down, right? And that just means that device, it couldn't query it, right? So it's down, basically. That's what it's reporting. Usually it takes a while when it makes a connection. It'll probably take like 20 minutes or so to go from down to up. Sometimes it'll say like something in between. It recognized it or something like that, okay? Make sure you follow all of this, okay? You make sure you follow all these instructions. How to add devices, how to add charts and graphs. So first, obviously, you'll add the devices. You'll see that they're up or down. And then after that, you can say, okay, now I want to select a template. So you'll have to select templates. You'll select templates. And those, I want a template. So for instance, you'll select, I want a Linux template for memory usage. okay? And that's gonna be under the graphs, right? So cacti is very, it's got really literally like a tab format, right? And then it's got a menu down here as well. And so you do this part, you do everything through the GUI configuration. That's the great thing about it is, you know, all of this is done through the GUI, so you just have to select which device you want, which variables you want, and, you know, let it generate the graphs. And as I said, it'll take a while to do it. Okay, so for instance, here you can see, select a template for local Linux machine. Okay. You'll notice that it'll say something like also a Cisco router, or you can even import templates, right? Not requiring that, but you could find, you know, templates online for, you know, let's say you have a printer, HP LaserJet, you know, 1300 or something like that. So that may not be in cacti by default, but that's the great thing about the standard and the MIB. So this is where the MIBs come in. That there's an MIB for the LaserJet 1300, and so you would get the template from some source, plug it into cacti, and now cacti will be able to query that printer, right? So that's the idea there, or a print server or something like that. Okay, and so that's it. All right, so that's basically it. You will show your results. So once you've configured everything, there's a few problems that you have to work on. So basically, I'll read through this. Now add some graphs for your device and describe. So you'll have a device, obviously. So you're going to add some graphs for that device and describe the results. So you can see here, you know, create graphs for this host, and then you're going to show screenshots of the collection of data for the graphs. Okay, so you need to show that. And also you might consider, if you want, you know, just for your own purposes, adding more machines, you know, adding other devices, your Mac maybe if you're using a Mac or anything like that. Okay, and that's basically the lab. So as you can see, the lab is pretty straightforward. It's actually, I think, it's one nice lab that's not very complex to accomplish. Okay, and then as far as the scripting and incorporating this with Apache, we're going to be doing that next week. All right, so that's basically the lab for today. So let me go back. Okay, so are there any questions about this lab, guys?
Nope.
Nope. Oh, wow. All right, so everything's pretty clear. All right, so let me.
I have questions about the last lab.
Okay,
That's all right.
So if there are no questions about this lab, then let's go ahead and move on to open the floor to questions about any other lab. So go ahead, Zach.
So for the file system analysis lab, I cannot get the victim SDA1 to mount. I keep getting, I can tell you, if you give me a moment, I can tell you the exact errors that I am getting.
Does it have data in it when you looked at it? Sometimes, so there could be many errors, right? One of the first questions I would ask is because when you run the command, it will create the file, but no data may be transferred to that file. So first thing that I would look at is check the file to see if the size of it is 0. If the size is not 0, like if the size is really, really large, you know, you do the math and it's pretty much the size of the other machine, then great, you were able to send the data, and then it's a simpler problem because you copied, what you're doing is you're copying the disk, and the disk has some file descriptors there that tell the command that you're using mount how to mount the file system on the mount point. Does that make sense?
Yes. Are you saying if it's empty that it won't mount? Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
If it, so let me say it. Let me see. If I can bring up. There's a whiteboard. All right. So what I mean is, you know, you run the command df-h, right? And you can also run the command ls-l wherever you have that file, right? So the file is called, this is on the receiving machine. So it would be victim SDA1, right? So you do ls-l, right? And then it's gonna show victim.sda1. If the size of this is 0, then what happened is the command created a file, but no data was sent. And so I've seen that problem before. However, if the size is not this, but it's actually okay, so if the size is actually, really large, like, it'll be a very long number, then you do have data there. So at least okay, I did copy the file. Now it's a mount command issue. And sometimes it's those parameters at the end of it that caused a problem. So did you check to see the size of your file?
Yeah, I just checked and it's 0.
Ah, okay, yeah. So, right. So that's a common mistake that it's not a mistake. It's just, it didn't send the data.
Well, what I'm confused about is that my output said that the output from the command that I ran said that it received it.
Data sent, right? It does say that.
Data sent and received.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't get how it could receive it and not set. I don't see how it could receive all the data on both ends, verifying that the data was sent and received, and it not and it not fill the image.
Yeah. So think it could be several things, right? So remember that you have two machines, right? And so you run a command here, a netcat command, right? And that just basically creates the file victim, SDA1. But then there's got to be the tunnel, right? And then you have to, with the DD command, you have to kind of forward the data into this tunnel and to come out here. So it could be several things. It could be that these commands are not correct, right? That's usually the command, or that you wrote the DD command somehow differently, incorrect. But that's where it would be. That's where the problem would be. So let me see. I have a handout here. Let me see if I can switch over to screen. Okay. All right. So I think you guys can see me now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So when you do your df-h command, you get something like this, correct? You get.
Can't see that down more. Yeah. Yes.
Right, and you get something like that. So you're trying to send dev SDA, right? And here I think it's like 3 gigs of size, 7 gigs of size, right? So that's something like that. So the question I asked, in my example here, it's size 7. Does the 1604 machine have at least 7 gigs of space?
Oh yeah, it has plenty of space.
Okay, excellent. All right, so then that covers that. Then let's see. I think on the lab it says that you should also run Fdisk, right? You guys see that? It's hard for me because I'm seeing it backwards. There. Right, Fdisk command, that gives you more information, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that you did that part. And then on the receiving machine, you ran this command, correct?
Oh, I remember I was emailing you saying that those commands weren't working, as I had to find something else to run.
Okay. Are you guys seeing this inverted, or do you see it?
No, I see it normal.
Normal. Okay, I see it inverted. All right, all right. So, okay, so there's where you started making changes, right? Okay.
Well, when I made those changes, I was actually working. I wasn't getting errors thrown.
Mm-hmm. What command? So here you didn't use netcat on this. It may not.
I used netcat. I didn't, or what did I use? I used netcat, but I didn't use the traditional bit. I was getting errors because of it.
That shouldn't be a, those change. You establish a port number 1234.
Yeah, I can. I'm putting in the chat exactly the command that I did.
Okay, and then that creates the. That's the command that you use there.
Yeah, to send the image, or to create and send it.
But you're sending it to yourself?
I'm sending it to aren't I sending it to the other machine doing it that way? Or that's what I did on the receive, and then on the other machine I sent it.
So if you think about the logic, on the receive you basically open a port. All you're doing is you open up. So how do I type on here? Okay, on here. All right. So on the receive, you are basically, think of it this way, right? You have a terminal, then you have netcat, and then you are opening a port. Okay, port. So you're saying, so actually, sorry. You're saying listen on port 1234, and that's just any of 65,000 ports above 1,000, right? Can you see this that I just typed, or I have to press enter, correct? Okay. And then, so that's that bit. Do you see that?
Yes.
So you're just saying at this point with that command, open on this machine, the receiving machine, port 1234, and listen to it. So you basically open a tunnel. Now, remember then you use redirection, right? So you do redirection, listen, -p, 1234, and there's a redirection to something called victim.sda1, and that's just a file you have created. You see that? So that's really what that command should do. And notice that you are almost saying in your command, listen on port 1234, and that I'm listening, and then whatever comes there, now send that to the DD command. You know what I'm saying?
I think so.
Yeah, Zach. So I would definitely on the receiving machine run this, because if your netcat 1234 work, there's no and pipe work, there's no reason why redirection will not work. Do you see that?
Yes, I just saved it.
Yeah, and then also everything that, I mean, this is just, what we've done in previous things is just redirecting to a file. We just gave it a funny name like victim SDA1, but you could have just called it myimage.txt. So you're creating a file that receives the data. It's just it's the DD data, so it's not actually a text file. It's a it's the copy of the disk drive itself. So all the everything, the format of the disk itself. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this part, that's how it should be. I mean, logically speaking, So then that's the part on the receiving machine. Then now you go. So now you go to the. Now you go to the sending machine. So this is on sending machine. This is the logic. So on sending machine, you would do So let me break this up. Now, let's say I'm a sending machine. I just want to create a netcat. I'm going to write to it. And I'm going to send to a machine, either a local host, which I can send to a local host, or an IP. So for instance, I'm going to send to 192.168.1.3. I'm just making up that number, but that number would be the IP of the machine where I open port 1234 to listen. Zach?
I don't think you hit enter on your computer.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
There we go.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, so that's now that's not the complete command, but I'm just explaining. If you just do that on the terminal, you're going to try to send a communication from your sending machine to the receiving machine. However, to complete it, you would do a netcat, the IP, 192.168.1.3, and then you have to specify the port number, which basically means you specify the socket. Remember, it's a socket. A combination of an IP and a port number is called a socket. So this command is actually the command from the sender to your machine that's waiting on port 123.4, and that port is tied to the file. So here you just created the tunnel, basically, between the both machines. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, now the full command is, let's say that instead of DD, I just did cat, right? So I just do cat, my secret.txt, right? And then that file, I'm going to pipe into netcat-w 192.168.1.3, port number 1234. You see that? So now I'm piecing together this even more. So I have a machine listening on port 1234, which is 192.168.1.3. Now I'm going to cat some file, and that gets piped, so redirected into the netcat command. And the netcat command then is the starting point of the tunnel that sends the data to 192.168.1.3. And that computer is listening on port number 1234. Does this make sense now?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and then to complete the command, obviously, instead of cat mysecret.txt, what we use there is the DD command, right? So what we do there, let me see if I can copy it. All right, so you're going to send to 192.168.1.3, port 1234. The port 1234, but instead of my secret, you actually send the entire partition, right? So you're copying, it's like a photocopy. Imagine you grab the hard drive and you just like scanned it, and it's just sending, the whole thing exactly as is there. So then you do DD, and you specify, you have to be in the folder, right? Of just to be sure, make sure you're in the full where you ran the df command. So, but actually I should say that you have a full path here. So root dev SDA1. Remember that it could be, another problem that could happen is that when you did that command, df-h, you didn't have an SDA1 in your device folder. If you don't have that, then it's not going to send anything, right? Because it doesn't exist. So this is actually the name of whatever appears when you run your df-h command. Does that make sense, guys?
Did you forget to hit enter again?
I forgot. And then you just specify the size of this. The size of info you're sending. Yeah, sorry, I forgot. You see that? So what I mean is that DD command, that last line, and then you see the dev SDA1. You see that?
Oh yeah, I see it.
And you still see me, right? You still see me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna do this. So I'm gonna, if you look there, when you do the df-h command, you see /dev SDA1, and the size is there. You see that? And so
Yes.
that's the thing. That's your disk partition. So that's the thing that you're sending.
Yeah, I understand that part.
Okay. Yeah. So if the name in your machine has changed, then change it on that command.
Okie dokie. Thank you.
Yeah, and that should be it. I mean, the other part is just doing it encrypted, but if you get this part, I mean, you've done it. I mean, the other part is just to kind of show you how to do it encrypted. All right, I'm glad that helped. All right. Are there any other are there any other questions, guys?
Nope.
Nope, no other. All right. So, well, work on your lab. I'll be here just in the chat room, whatever, the Zoom room. Either write something on the chat if you have a question, or just ask a question. I'm not going to give anything else because, you know, I'm just giving you time to work on the lab and ask questions about the lab. So, no, I'm not gonna. So if you want to sign off, that's okay. I'm not gonna give you any additional description of the lab assignment. What I do want to do, again, just because I always have 1 or 2 students that miss the exam, please don't forget the exam is on Monday at the time on Blackboard. So you won't see me, right? So, you know, I won't be on the video. Just go to Blackboard and take the exam. Tonight the labs are due, and you know, all the labs, if you have questions about them. And then if you're done with your labs, please start working on SNMP. So this is should be a fun lab for you. Otherwise, you know, ask any questions that you have. I'll be here. All right. Thank you.
Deanna asked a question in chat.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's a question. So I did say that I was going to leave these open for longer, right? You're right. You're right. Okay. I can, yeah, just, you know, don't forget, I will, I don't want to do it now because I already closed Blackboard, but I will extend them. So don't worry about it. That's right. I'll give you guys more time.
Okay. Well, that's all I got. I'm gonna go back to hitting the grindstone. Thanks for doing this, Professor.
You can sign out if you want, or I'm gonna be here on, you know, the whole period. So just sign back in, whatever. What I might do though is I'm going to close just to save this video, so I can post it on YouTube, and then I don't have all this time of video with nothing on it. Okay, guys. So I'm going to close, sign out, and then sign back in again. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
See you later.
Yeah.